doing. Lee Berg, chairman of Archway Communities, and his associate Katie McKenna are here tonight to chat with us about Archway's role in providing affordable housing at the Mosaic community. Lee is also pastor at Wash Park UCC, and he and I met while serving on the board and real estate committee of the Rocky Mountain Conference of the UCC. Lee and I both shared a friend and mentor, Rob Lapp. Rob was an active member of this church for many years. He co-founded Archway, a sister nonprofit of La Forêt. Rob was also heavily involved with La Forêt, two independent entities tied to the mission of Rocky Mountain Conference. 3 days before Rob passed away last May, I called Rob to ask what our church could do to become involved with Archway at Mosaic. I'm getting my thoughts together because it was just 3 days later that Rob passed away after I talked to him. And Rob was in the pre-op area when I chatted with him, believe it or not. That was typical of Rob, as Lee will tell you. I called who would take a phone call and see on the thing, but only Rob Lapp, and who would want to talk about, before he went in operation, his love for Archway. Lee Berg is kind enough to carry that torch, and he is carrying a big torch of Rob Lapp's. A bit of history before I turn things over to Lee and Katie. The Colorado Women's College was founded in 1888, with the first building finished in 1909 and the campus started. Campus was at Montview and Quebec on the east side of Park Hill, as you guys know, and it's the new home for Mosaic. It was founded by a pastor of the First Baptist Church in Denver. And Lee comes from that tradition, so we won't hold anything about a Baptist minister doing that. And he wanted to have a Western college in the West to be as equivalent and as good as Vassar College in the East. So I don't know whether he was a snob from the East or where he came from. That's quite interesting. In 2001, the campus became the campus for Johnson and Wales University. In June 2021, the Urban Land Conservancy, the Denver Housing Authority, and the Denver Public Schools purchased the campus for art, educational, residential, and other purposes. Mosaic is on the forefront of the Urban Conservancy and right in our own historic neighborhood. Lee and Katie will specifically tell us about affordable housing at Archway, but they're going to also tell us about the other folk that are there, and then tell us about what we may be able to do to help and volunteer in their efforts. So Lee Berg, my friend, take it away. He purposely broke his leg skiing to avoid preaching on Sunday.
On Easter Sunday, right? No. And I think I'm just going to go ahead and stand on one leg. And, I told my congregation this past Sunday when I did preach that there's a joke out there that if God had meant for Texans to ski, and I'll tell you afterwards, the rest of it is not appropriate for this gathering. But anyway, it's a joy to be with you. Not my first time at Park Hill, and I appreciate your taking time to be here. I came to Colorado in 2001. I had left ministry as a Baptist minister in 1994, I guess, 95. In 95, I went to work for the National Education Association in Washington, D.C., and in their Human and Civil Rights Division, and then eventually transferred to our Denver office. And when I transferred, I moved to Boulder. My brother's an attorney in Boulder and has a law firm there, and made that area my home. And I started looking for a church to go to. And my wife said that she had attended this church called Community. And so we decided we'd check out the churches in Boulder, and then we went to Community, and Pete Terpenning was the pastor at the time. And I had, in my work in Washington, D.C., gone to meetings at the Social Justice Office of the United Church of Christ. And I started reading UCC materials. Now, I was raised a Southern Baptist, and I was run out because I was a liberal Southern Baptist, and that's not oxymoronic. Well, yeah, it is. But anyway,
Been there.
yeah, I've been there and done that, especially now. But I always knew I'd had a home if I ever wanted to return to ministry, and eventually that we joined in Community in 2005 or 2006, and one of the first people to greet me was Rob Lapp. And Rob being kicked out of the Methodist church, I was run out of the Baptist church, and two peas in a pod. But Rob was responsible for me considering returning to ministry, and then he was responsible for guiding me through the processes of meeting with committees on ministry and so forth to get authorization in the UCC, and eventually was given full ministerial standing in the UCC by the Metropolitan Denver Association of the Rocky Mountain Conference of the United Church of Christ. That's what I remember a good bit about that process. And Rob would say to me, "Lee, you've been ordained already. Don't you let them make you go through ordination again." And but he was a champion, and he loved Archway. Part of my work with NEA involved doing organizational development for boards of trustees for nonprofit groups and primarily state affiliates of NEA. And I had done some work out here in Colorado, and he was talking about some of the struggles that Archway was having a number of years ago. And I said, if there's anything, if I could help do some board development work with you, roles and responsibilities and so forth. And he said, "Why don't you just come on the board?" So I asked for it. And you just didn't say no to Rob, but he loved Archway. I was interim pastor at Community UCC when his beloved Jan tragically fell down their stairs and had to go into hospice care, and then died sometime in the week that followed. And I walked with Rob and his family through that. Last year, Rob had slipped on some ice and had fractured his shoulder. And he was, when you're in your late 80s, one of the things they always talk to you about when you have surgery is that, the surgery can be successful, but what comes after is always a bigger challenge. And he had surgery on the Monday of that week that Larry talked to him, and I was by to see him on Wednesday, and his son Stuart, who's from Houston now, was there. And every time somebody walked in to see Rob from the hospital, he would ask two questions. First question would be, "Do you have anything to do with enabling me to go home tomorrow? I've got too much work to do." And then he would say, "Have you ever heard of Archway?" And he would launch into telling nurses, CNAs, and anybody, doctors, anybody that came in about Archway, and introduce his son. And on his way to the hospital on that Monday, he brought his son by Archway's headquarters. And Rob was known to just drop in on our CEO and the staff, and which was just part of who Rob was. And that was the love of his life after Jan had passed. And Jan had Alzheimer's, and it was a struggle for her. Every Sunday she'd come out and tell me what a good sermon I'd preached, even on those Sundays when it was really a dead fish and that couldn't be resurrected. So she just a delight. And the reason I bring up Jan is because from the time that David Nestor of Urban Lights, if you listen to the ads on the radio, called up Rob and said, "Hey, can we do something about helping people get housing?" And Rob said, "Yeah, we can do it." So they worked on it. They helped pass legislation that created the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, commonly known as CHAFA. And they started Archway 27 years ago. David and Rob first met at La Forêt. David was in 8th grade and Rob was the camp pastor. And David's about my age. Long time, good friends. And that's how Archway got off the ground. And where Jan comes in is Jan was a social worker in her own right. And she insisted, as Rob would say, that it wasn't enough to build affordable housing. You have to help provide services that people who are struggling to make ends meet, that will help them stay in the affordable housing when they get there. And that's a challenge, and it's a huge challenge, but from the very beginning, it has set aside Archway from other developers who do affordable housing. So that's part of the history. You all, I'm sure, have heard, I think Rob spoke here, raising money for Archway at least once or twice, or probably a lot more than that. That's where Archway came from. Several years ago, because I was his vice chair, I was put in charge of the search committee for a new CEO for Archway, and eventually Sebastian Corradino came on board first as an interim CEO to help us make sure all of our ducks were in a row, so to speak, and as we transitioned from a 20-year exec into a new exec. And he had been our first choice, and because of some family things going on, the loss of a stepfather and caring for his mother back east, he was hesitant about making a commitment. But he came on board, made a commitment, has been our CEO for 3 years now, and Archway has taken off. And previously we would do one project at a time. And we'd complete a project and break ground on the next one. 2 of the newest buildings that we built, flats at 2 Creek and 40 West, had a designated number of apartments set aside for homeless veterans. And we work with the VA on housing formerly homeless veterans in those 2 properties, actually in all our properties. And because of what vets have gone through, they present a unique set of challenges. And at first, the VA kind of just dropped them at our feet and said, "Here." Our vice chair of the board is Leah Martinez, and her mother just happened to work in the VA for 25 years. And she helped us, along with the VA, get the appropriate resources in to help the veterans. We get to 2 big projects that were going on last year we were trying to close on. Mosaic, and Katie's going to tell you all about Mosaic in just a moment. And then at the end of the year, we purchased Montview Manor, which is a high-rise 62 plus facility that was built by Montview Presbyterian Church in the 60s. And they've had it and have managed it, but were ready to sell it. And they were just ecstatic to find a faith-based community that would honor the traditions upon which they had built Montview Manor. And Archway is that organization. We are affiliated with the United Church of Christ through the Rocky Mountain Conference, the Council on Health and Human Service Ministries, Chisholm, we're a part of. I've agreed to serve on their board moving forward. But the confidence that the community is beginning to place in Archway comes from the 20+ years of folks like Rob and David Nestor and other board members who have given of their time, their energy, their talent, their money, their support to help build a ministry that focuses on serving human needs 7 days a week. One of the things Rob and I talked about was, we have all these churches with all this property. Is there any way that we can combine the two and build affordable housing and still have community space for gathering, for worship, and for dinners, and for fellowship hours, and for weddings, and for memorial services, and so forth? And we keep hearing that, yes, we can. And I think we can, and that's one of the things we're looking at. Washington Park is trying to decide what next steps are for Washington Park. We have $4.5 million worth of real estate, and 40 on a good Sunday in-house, and another 15 or 20 online. And so we're talking about next steps. First Plymouth is talking about Faithful Futures. Sixth and other congregations are saying, what's church in the 21st century? How do we do church in this century? What is church 3.0, to put it in John Dorauer's terms from Beyond Resistance? So lots happening out there. And one of the great things is Mosaic, which will be 154 units of affordable housing coming from 400 dormitory rooms from Colorado Women's College, Johnson and Wales, now Mosaic. Katie, come tell us about Mosaic.
Thanks, Lee, and thanks so much for having us tonight. Unlike Lee, this is my first time in Park Hill, and it's a beautiful place. Thanks so much for inviting us. Zeke, are there slides that you're able to pull up? I brought some pretty pictures that I want you all to see. Excellent, thanks so much. You can go to the next slide, and we might skip through some of the beginning because Lee did a great job with the foundation. So this is just a little bit more about Archway. I think one of the most important things that Lee highlighted is the importance for us of coupling services alongside the housing, because it's one thing to have an affordable place to live, but particularly for folks who've been struggling with homelessness, or new immigrants to the US, or single parents, or families who've just had struggles with the economic realities that we live in today, being able to have access to services so that once you get an affordable place to live, you also have access to job training, language classes, a food bank, after school care for kids, all the other things that we all know are so important to us in our day-to-day life, all come with the Archway package. So if you can go to the next slide. Lee already shared about Rob and our connections there, so we can go forward. Sorry to do this to you, Zeke. Keep going. And one more. Trying to get to the Montview Manor one. Okay, one more. All right, this is the first one. The Mosaic campus Originally Colorado Women's College, and then Johnson and Wales campus. When it went out of business, an organization called the Urban Land Conservancy and a group of partners, including the Denver Housing Authority and Denver Public Schools, really wanted to make sure that the campus would remain a campus and would move into its next life and continue to be a thriving part of Denver, continue to be a place where housing and education and art and workforce training could all come together. And without a university owner, they really had a chance to re-envision what that could look like. You can go to the next slide. Oh, one more. Sorry about this. And one more. Okay, there we go. One more. There we go. So this is a picture of one of the dorm buildings, President's Hall. Archway was fortunate to be able to come into the Mosaic campus partnership after the Urban Land Conservancy, Denver Housing Authority, and Denver Public Schools acquired the piece of property as the development partner to redevelop these dorm buildings. Now you may think, well, it was already housing, you know, what really did you have to do? But if you can imagine dorms, the place where 400 college kids want to live, that's a little bit different than the place where now in the future 154 families with kiddos and grandparents and everything that comes along with that are going to live. So we've been working really thoughtfully through the design. As you can see, they're just beautiful buildings, and many of you probably know from passing by frequently. They're beautiful buildings. They have wonderful history, beautiful architecture, and they're situated in just a lovely way on the campus. So those buildings are definitely something valuable to preserve. And what we're doing right now, if you've been by, is we're totally tearing apart the entire inside to make them accommodating for all of the families who are going to be moving in. And some of the funny things that we have found along the way, although all of the buildings do architecturally look similar, or at least like siblings from the outside, they were all actually built over a period of 30 years and by many different people. And all of the repairs done on the inside were also done by a variety of different people. So if maybe you're like me and you have lived in an old house at some period in your life, and you know, over the course of living there, you kind of take things apart and think like, now who did that? Or why in the world would that be that way? Well, that's exactly what's going on at the Mosaic campus right now in the 4 dormitory buildings. We're taking them apart piece by piece. A lot of building materials that were hazardous today that we didn't know that they were back then. So a lot of contaminant mitigation and work that needs to be done. So it may look like absolutely nothing is happening on the outside, but so much is happening on the inside to prepare these homes, turn them into apartments for future families. The buildings were applied for and received historic preservation status. So and basically what that means is that the entire exterior, a lot of the beautiful molding and casing and windows will be able to keep in place. We received tax credits through a historic tax credit program that allows us some financial resources to be able to do that. So while the residents and the folks who are going to be living there in the future will be entirely different than the college kids who lived there in the past, the outside buildings and kind of the face of this part of the campus is going to look much the same on the outside. One of my favorite places in the kind of around the side of this building, there's an old college bookstore. And the place that, at least when I was in college, I would always groan and grumble and drag myself to the bookstore because I knew I was about to spend every penny I made at my silly lifeguarding job in between classes at the bookstore because college textbooks are so expensive. And I imagine a lot of people felt this way about this bookstore too. But one of the, it's just a beautiful part of this building, old wood. The bookstore was in the part of the building that was very first built, so it's the oldest part from the late 1800s, has just beautiful wood bookshelves throughout, high ceilings, lovely millwork, some kind of funny light fixtures. There's a light fixture in there that has like dogs that are holding little lanterns. So it's looks like, a grand light fixture or a chandelier. And when you look a little closer, you realize that it's metal dogs holding little lanterns. But anyways, so it's really fun to have a project like this that will get to keep all of these little features, and it's exciting to think about. The bookstore, we're considering all kinds of different iterations, potentially a bookstore or a library, a thrift store is also on the table. Really going to figure out what the needs are for the residents who are going to live there. But I do love thinking about that the chandelier will stay, and I love thinking about the kids laughing at the dog chandelier sometime in the future. So if you go, let's see what the next slide is, if you don't mind. This is a little bit of the history. Larry did a much more colorful job describing it, but all the way back to 1909 was when the Colorado Women's College opened up, and the first of the dorms were built in the 1920s. Initially, when Colorado Women's College opened, I've been told that the surrounding area, many of the homes, would have the women who are students as boarders living in all, homes, maybe even all the way over here, and people would walk and they would take the streetcars over to get to campus. And meanwhile, a lot of the women were petitioning, please just build dorms, be like the men's colleges. We just want to live on campus so that we can, all be together and study and have a real college experience. And they finally did. So the Women's College operated through the 1920s, and then into the 1960s was when Johnson and Wales purchased the campus. So it continued to operate much, still like a college campus. One of the unique pieces of the history that came in with Johnson and Wales was culinary arts and culinary and hospitality school. And that's a piece that will be living on in the campus through the form of the Kitchen Network, which is a nonprofit organization that helps train, provides culinary training and helps start up small entrepreneurial businesses, folks who want to open small restaurants or start food trucks and catering businesses have become even more popular than the brick and mortar restaurants, I've been told. And so that'll be a resource that's on the campus. And I think I actually kind of told the history backwards. So I've already told you about Archway and then ULC DPS and the Denver Housing Authority. So let's go to the next slide. I'll just keep talking about the campus a little bit. I do about the Kitchen Network. One of the other housing partners on the site is the Denver Housing Authority. So the Denver Housing Authority will be rebuilding and remodeling and adding new housing. So those plans are still in the design phase, so we don't know exactly what that will end up looking like yet. Kind of when all of the campus partners started talking about what was to come of the campus, one of the things that we wanted to prioritize was not tearing the whole dang thing apart all at once, but being able to keep it active. The school is still there. It's an active part of the community. And so when Archway and Denver Housing Authority were talking, the housing construction is some of the most disruptive part of the work that will be happening on the campus, and we decided not to do it all at once. So we'll get the Archway homes open towards the end of 2024, and then Denver Housing Authority will follow after with their housing. Some of the other things, so St. Elizabeth's School and Denver School of the Arts have been operating there, and both of them are going to maintain current space, but also renovate and expand, particularly thinking about the number of new young kiddos who will be living on the property and on the campus that had never been before, providing services, arts education, and schooling for some of the younger kids is one of the priorities. And then Denver Public Schools will continue to operate their school, expanding programming as well, and that's for high schoolers. So we'll continue to remain a really vibrant campus and hopefully robust part of Park Hill. And I think it will be fun to see in 10 years or in 20 years, you know, who are the people sitting in these seats or in our shoes now who will be looking back at, you know, this was another turning point in the history of this Denver location. So I have a couple of things that I would love to invite you to and include you in the future. One, and the most current thing is on May 8th, which is a Thursday, May 18th, which is a Thursday, we're going to have a ribbon cutting at the Mosaic campus. Now, a lot of times in construction projects, you hear about groundbreakings, and we don't need to break any ground because the building is already there, but we still want to have a good party, and so we're going to be doing a ribbon cutting is what we decided on. But we'll have, a lot of the buildings will be under construction, so we won't really be able to offer big tours, but we will open up whatever little bits we are able to give folks a glimpse. We'll have refreshments and speakers, and some of the other campus partners will be joining us as well. So we would love to have you attend that event. Despite not looking like much from the outside, there really is a lot of work to be done. So we won't be finishing construction until towards the end of 2024, which is when we'll expect families to be moving in. When it's time for families to move in, would love your help. We always look for folks who can help spread the word in the community to people who might be looking for affordable housing or might know people who know people. Word of mouth is one of the best ways that new residents find out about Archway and how to move into these affordable homes. So we'll ask for your help there. And then one of the other things that we always do is a supply drive and welcome basket, so that when people do move in, the stress of moving is immense for anyone, and having some of the basics there for you, especially if you're a family with small kids, right when you move in, you know, your laundry soap, your dish soap, maybe some sheets and things like that, is just such a relief for folks to have that. So we'll be sure to reach out to you when that happens as well. And then the last thing that I'll tell you about, we have a property over on Wadsworth Boulevard. It's called Robinson Place, named for Rob Lapp. It is opening later this summer, so construction is winding down. If anyone travels up and down Wadsworth right around 20th, you may have seen this building, but it's nearly finished, and we're leasing it now, and we'll have folks moving in this summer, and next week we're going to be launching our supply drive for those new families. That group will be seniors, and as Lee said, we have some homes set aside for veterans as well. So the supply list will be a little bit different there than at our Park Hill location, but would love to circulate that to you all as well, because it's really wonderful to have as many folks helping as possible. And now you can drop things off at our physical location, but now we just use the Amazon gift list. And so it's really easy, you can put something in your cart and it lands in our cart, and that's all you have to do. So why don't I see if anyone has questions. I know there are folks on Zoom and maybe some other places as well. So if any of those folks have questions or comments or something you want to share about the Park Hill campus.
Before we ask questions, once residents are in,
Yes.
are there volunteers that provide some of the services to the residents? Can you tell us about that?
There,
This is the future. I know
Yep.
you have exercise programs, you have all sorts of things.
Yeah, so we often, so every property is a little bit different. We do a needs assessment and work with residents to determine what the right programming is. And at our family properties, we usually do things, we often have exercise classes or yoga programs, lots of times after school care. Our job training programs are really popular at our family sites. And then depending on the folks who live there, English as a second language has been another really popular service provision that Archway does. We do other things like financial literacy training, sometimes have had homebuyer classes for folks. Some folks move into Archway homes and want to stay there for a very long time. For some folks, it's a landing spot to get back on their feet, to get some savings and, move on to the next thing. And we want to support whatever that ends up being. So we're now thinking into, end of 2024, 2025, but we'll certainly have ways for people to be involved. And the best way to keep in touch with us, of course, we'll be sure to reach back out to you, but one of the easy ways to keep in touch with us is to join our newsletter list. So if you go on your phone or at home when you have a computer, archwaycommunities.org is our website. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, don't scroll too fast because there's lots of fun stuff about Archway that I didn't get to tell you about today. But if you scroll all the way down, there's a way to sign up for our newsletter. And so you'll always be sure to get all of our updates about the Mosaic campus, including future volunteer opportunities.
Questions?
How many units will there be in the dorm that's actually there now on the corner?
Oh, so I couldn't tell you, there are 4 dorms. In total, there's 154, there will be 154 new apartments. And I just don't remember how many are in each building.
And then my other question is, what is Denver Housing Authority going to do? I mean, are they going to build little places all over, or where are they going to put them, or what size will they be?
Yeah, good question. We don't know all of those details yet. They own one of the buildings that's not in service anymore. And one of the ideas is to do a renovation similar to what Archway is doing. It could also be something where they build onto an existing building or build next to an existing building. I just don't think they're that far along in planning. That wouldn't be too likely, yeah. So her question was, it's probably not going to be small units all over the place. And while I am not authorized to speak, I don't know for sure. I would really doubt that.
And Archway's units will be from, I guess, studio or 1 bedrooms up to 2 or 3 bedrooms as
Yep.
well. And so there's enough room to put families into these places. We had hoped to move the project faster. We tore out a couple of bathrooms in the first couple of buildings and they all look great. But if you've ever watched HGTV, Love It or List It, when we started work in the buildings, we started finding bathrooms that had mold in them. And so, it slowed everything down. But it's exciting, and we can't get it done fast enough because the need's great.
Before I turn here, are there any questions? Should we take a question from anybody online? Zeke? We'll go then here. Did I see somebody?
Could you explain some of the financial terms or arrangements for the tenants?
Yeah, so there's a program called the Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which is a federal program and is one of the common ways that affordable housing is built, and in this case, an adaptive reuse of dorm projects. So that's the main financing source, in addition to the historic tax credits that we're using to actually build the homes. And then Archway will place a deed restriction on the property, which will make the homes affordable in perpetuity. And they'll be at 60% of the area median income, 50% of the area median income, and some at 30% of the area median income. Now that's kind of a wonky way to talk about, well, who can afford to actually live here? But the reason that we've set the rents based on income rather than just setting rents is because we know that the folks who are at the lowest ends, 30% of the area median income, that's 30% of the incomes that folks are making in Denver. We know that that is a level of income that's really hard to afford housing. And so what we do is we make sure to set the rent at only no more than 30% of what that family's income is. So if that gives you a little bit of a clue as to why I'm backing into, rather than just telling you what a rent amount is, I'm talking about the incomes of the folks who will live there, because we want to make sure that the rent is no more than 30% of the income, and that's the important metric for us. So if you, right now in Denver, an area median income is determined based on family or household size as well. So a single person, 100% of the area median income right now is right around $85,000. So 30% of that would be, if I could do my math, right around $40,000 maybe. And so similarly for a 2-person household, a little bit higher, 3-person household, a little bit higher. We think a lot of the folks who will live in the Mosaic campus will be 3- and 4-person families, and so that will probably be right around $50,000 to $60,000 of total household income per year. Which, if you can imagine, I mean, just think how much the price of everything has gone up over the last year, but certainly the cost of housing, having that relief, being able to have a more affordable rent and only pay a third of your income, that'll be huge.
Let me clarify as a financial person.
Yes.
I'm confused. Median income in this area of a 1-person family is $80,000?
Mm-hmm. That's 100%.
Thank you. And 30% of that is not 40,000.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't put me on the
that's
spot
all right.
with math.
So if I were a single person, the median income, I would qualify to get one of your units if I made $23,000.
That's right, yes.
That's a better way to say it. I think that's one of your questions, right? Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that, Larry.
Yeah, that's all right. No, I missed it. Good. I think you had a question.
Does Archway operate autonomously in the situation, or do you have contractual relationships with the other entities?
Oh, yeah. We do have contractual relationships. So Urban Land Conservancy and the partnership with Urban Land Conservancy owns all of the land of the campus. They're what's called a community land trust. And so they purchase and own land, develop things for community serving uses all throughout the Metro Denver area. So there's a land lease between Archway and the Urban Land Conservancy. That's the main contract. And then beyond that, we have just partnership agreements with the other folks who are working on the campus, because really our goal is that this campus operates like an ecosystem and the way a campus really operates, and that folks who live in Archway's property will be able to take classes at the Kitchen Network, and their kids will be able to get into school easily and all that kind of stuff. But that's a little bit less of a legal agreement than the land lease is.
Since we're experimenting for future use, anyone that's on Zoom that would like to ask a question, let's experiment and unmute yourself and see if we get feedback and you can ask a question. No one? Somebody can't be.
Maybe someone's just brave enough to test the system.
I'm brave.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. Kat?
Yes, yeah, it's Kat Gaskins. I guess my question is, can you back up a little bit and talk about the current properties, what groups they're serving?
Yeah, you bet. Are you thinking of current Archway properties or current
Yes.
properties? Yeah.
Archway properties.
Yeah, definitely. So Archway has properties, rental homes throughout the metro Denver area. Some of them are for families, similar to the Mosaic campus. Some are designated for seniors, so the Montview Manor property that Lee talked about is designated for seniors. Robinson Place will be mostly seniors as well. We have 2 properties on West Colfax that are really close to each other, basically could be thought of as one property. The folks who live there are people who have experienced recently homelessness and extreme housing insecurity. A lot of those folks have really intense service needs. So physical health, mental health, behavioral health, that is the property with the most rich services of all of ours. We have some of our properties are kind of like looks more like a 5-story new apartment building. We have some that are look a lot more like townhomes and kind of, lower density housing that's more in the suburbs. So a really big variety in our housing. And I can send the slides out through Larry. I have a lot of pictures and that you can flip through. I'm trying to save Zeke having to go through each slide again. But
some of our properties also have significant numbers of migrant individuals who have come to the country and are seeking to relocate here and go through the immigrant process. And it just varies from community to community, basically.
Kat, could you do me a favor, since you were such a nice volunteer and we're experimenting? Could you come back on, unmute yourself and show us your face, and let's see if it works for the future, being able to have a dialogue. Can you do that for me?
There she is.
hi, Kat.
Hi, Kat.
And how do you make her big on the screen? She has to talk. Talk to us. Talk to us, Kat.
Okay, I guess I have to talk.
Perfect.
I can do
there it
that.
is.
Okay. Thank
Thanks
you.
for being
Thank you,
guinea
Kat.
pig.
Thank you very much.
One of the newest buildings on that campus, as you probably know, is the former DU Law School. And we toured it probably a year ago when they first took over the campus. And there are a lot of wonderful classrooms there, I think, that Johnson and Wales were using. And I was thinking about the fact that when you said earlier, which I think is correct, that people not only need housing, they need the surround services of mental health and other kinds of education. You know whether they're going to use any of that old law school building for classes, for teaching, and also for other services that will be needed by the residents?
I don't really know what the law school specifically is going to be, but let me see if I can ask around and learn more. Claude?
She didn't have a mic.
Yes. She looked like she might know the answer, which is why I, oh no.
So my question is, since this is a word-to-mouth kind of how to get into the housing thing, would you take undocumented immigrants who do not have a social security number? Because I feel like that is something that we have even encountered here at church. So.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So these new homes, we will be able to accept undocumented folks who don't have documentation status. Some of our older properties, there is our federal financing sources in there that at the time that they were built federal money was not allowed to be used for folks who are undocumented, so we're not in turn allowed to rent apartments to those folks. I'm really glad that that's not how things are working going forward, but we do still have some of that legacy stuff, and we always just encourage people to talk to we have resident services providers that know exactly this one will work, this one won't work.
My question is a tag-on question to Sue Ricketts about Denver Housing Authority.
Yeah.
We all know Archway's history, and we know that you follow through with your clients and you have all these services. Denver Housing Authority doesn't have that reputation. And I guess my concern is both for the neighborhood, but more for the kids at the School of the Arts, that, you know, is DHA going to screen and care for their residents, whatever they end up building, the way you do? I'm very concerned about that.
Yeah, that seems like a reasonable concern. I honestly don't know all of the details of the way that the Housing Authority operates, kind of in comparison to the way that Archway operates. But one of the things that I do know is that the surrounding community can make a really big difference in residents' lives, regardless of who their landlord is. And so my hope is being somewhere like Park Hill and being on the campus with so many opportunities, and just this part of Denver with so many opportunities, that the folks who live in the building, in these homes, and Archway homes included, and hopefully the surrounding neighborhood as well, will really feel that they have just robust opportunities and services, and what they need to thrive and to be good neighbors.
We hope to do is if we can keep working to set the example for how to do affordable housing in ways that meet the concerns of those who have seen it not done right in other areas, that it's in itself will have an impact on DHA and anyone else who is working to do a similar kind of effort. It is a challenge, no doubt, but our goal is to lead by example, and as one of the partners, I think hopefully Archway will be able to exert some positive influence that will help overcome some of the challenges that we associate at times with DHA and some of the past experiences.
To respect your time, Lee and Katie, we have a few more questions, I think, and we're running out of time. Kat, you wanted another question, I'm told. Another question?
I do have another question, and that is, Johnson and Wales had a pretty robust culinary program. Are there plans to use that space for training? I mean, I can see a lot of things that could happen there, but has that been explored?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a nonprofit organization called the Kitchen Network that will be taking advantage of that space and is kind of going through a similar process to what Archway is doing, is figuring out, what pieces make sense to keep and what pieces need renovated and how much it's all going to cost. But ultimately, it's going to be a startup incubator for culinary businesses, whether it's brick and mortar restaurants or food trucks or catering or some other type of culinary business in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I think so too.
There's so many possibilities. Leah, there's a chapel over there also. There's a chapel on the campus, am I correct?
I believe so.
And is it being used by anyone?
I'm not aware of it, but I'm sure you've sparked some interest. Yeah, they may be.
Are they?
Yeah,
Are they? Our
yeah.
School of the Arts getting it?
Yeah.
Actually, there already is a coffee house over there called Dirt, and I can't remember what it stands for, but they have a killer London fog tea and
Oh, that is good to
really
know.
nice pastries, and it's a training program for people with developmental disabilities. So it seems, it's a great place to go have a cup of coffee.
No, Lee,
Any more?
last comments. Go ahead.
Any more time, but the two of the buildings that we've recently built, flats at
Two Creeks.
Two Creeks and 40 West, both of those buildings have community gathering spaces in them that are large enough to host any kind of gathering. And it could be church related, it could be community related. But the part of the idea is if we are able to take the spaces that we have and put them into ministry work 7 days a week and have space. I'm talking about ministry work around affordable housing or other social justice efforts. And there's space for the church to continue to gather, that we're repurposing space and using it to its maximum effectiveness. And the evidence that we're beginning to see is that when congregations do this, that the congregations are revived. And it is, nothing's a cure-all, but there are, it's kind of the rock bottom belief that if you meet the needs of the community, that is the church, and that is the work of the church. And so we hope to see some combination of those kinds of things.
Just a quick question. Is there a mechanism, or what is the mechanism that allows the coordination of all of these organizations on this particular piece of property? Is there some kind of a organizing committee, or how do you communicate with these other organizations?
I think Urban Land Conservancy is probably the driving factor here, and they are constantly looking for ways to create communities like this. And so
So do you meet with them regularly?
We do.
yeah, all the time. Yeah, the part of the real estate team or construction team, there's constant communication so that we all stay in this together.
Yeah. And right now, we're spending a lot of time talking about whose trucks are moving where when, but we're really looking forward to when this phase is over and we're spending our time more talking about how are all the services and the programs coming together.
Right.
Thank you so much for your time and your presentation, and for our experimentation on live and in person. And
We're all doing it. I mean, 2 years ago, none of us was in television ministry. Yeah, right? I didn't have it in seminary or graduate school, so it's let me commend you for your experimentation, and we just thank the world for Peter Sawtelle over at Washington Park, that he was in tech before he went into ministry and eco-justice ministry. So he's been don't tell him I said this, our savior when it comes to our online.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you for taking your time out to be with us tonight. Really appreciate it. And if God had meant for Texans, I'm going to turn my microphone off.